Hey beer fans, my name's Steve Jaguar. This is another Beer Native beer review in combination with the series that I do called What Makes Beer Great. And the reason I'm combining these ones is because I'm reviewing a beer by a brewery called ABK. And that is the Actien Brewery of Kaufbeuren. And that was established in 1308. Now, if you take a look at some of their core range, they have a 700 you can see on the label saying this brewery is 700 years old. That's older than America and Canada and a lot of other countries probably, right? Which kind of boggles the mind that a brewery can be handed down through generations and not change, not corrupt themselves. And that leads me to the What Makes Beer Great subject. And that is the Bavarian Purity Act of 1516. What is happening prior to 1516 that a government or a region in this case needs to put regulation in place to say, hey, whoa, 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 you can only use, slow down, you can only use water, barley malt, and hops to make beer, okay? What was being peddled as beer before that in that region that they said, no, okay, that you're taking the piss now. Just use these. And that is the Bavarian Purity Act. Now, what's interesting about the Bavarian Purity Act, if you listen carefully, is that I didn't say yeast. Originally, it didn't have yeast. And it was just 3 ingredients. Now it's more commonly known as 4. And when I say commonly known, I would say that it's pretty commonly known now. I used to buy beer in Canada 20 years ago, and some breweries would actually print Brewed to the Bavarian Purity Act on the label, even though they were Canadian beers. It was like a marketing effort to say, look, we're making very pure beer here. We're not putting all sorts of junk in. Perhaps making a little dig at some of the American lagers that use rice as adjuncts to generate fermentable sugars. But what's cool about it is that it's a thing. Like it's really old and it's still around, and Germany is still brewing beers under it. Now it's changed a lot since, as you can see, it's added yeast now, and it's also added a few things like fermentable sugars and a few other adjuncts, and it's created a few other extra rules around it that indicate that you can deviate from this, but you maybe cannot sell it as beer. So maybe it applies more to labeling and branding and marketing than it does to actual manufacturing of beer. But I think people understand what beer is now, and no one's going to start throwing all sorts of weird crap in there and just calling it beer now, which is still very cool. And it's really interesting that this sort of purity or this regulation was pioneered from Germany. What's also interesting is that it of course predates Germany. It was something that comes from the Holy Roman Empire, and that included Germany at the time.
And what have they ever given us in return? The aqueduct? What? The aqueduct?
And beer.
Oh, yeah, they did give us that. That's true, yeah. And the sanitation.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. There's even evidence to show that it existed more locally in Munich before it became, like a century before it became part of Bavaria, before at German unification in the 1800s, where, believe it or not, Bavaria insisted that Germany as a whole take on their purity law. It's like, wow, okay, so we're going to unite the country. Bavaria, what do you want? You gotta do our beer law. Otherwise it's a deal breaker. It's like, okay, right, respect to Bavaria. Very cool. All right, that's the Bavarian Purity Law part. There's a lot of information on it. I highly recommend go reading articles on it. There's tons of stuff out there. It was originally called the Reinheitsgebot, if you want to do the German version, which actually translates to purity order. My German's pretty rusty. I think it's something along those lines. I'm remembering, and I studied German in university. But let's take a look at the beer we're going to be tasting in the fridge. No beer spinny beer cam today because the beer was too big. I couldn't get it onto the little rotating platform, so it's a pretty static image. But here it is in my hand. You can see it looks pretty awesome. I really like the label. I'm not going to judge this beer, though, in the same way, because when you're judging a beer from a brewery that's 700 years old, and who knows how long this specific beer has been made, this is the type of beer that is the standard from which others have been derived. It's like if I listened to the Beatles and went, I don't know, It's not quite unique. It sounds a lot like a lot of the modern pop music. So I can't really do that, right? Not with beers like this. So I'm just going to go and give it a rating on whether I like it or not. I'm going to be pretty old school about this one. So let's get it out of the fridge. Let's grab our opener. And there we have it. Now, taking a quick look at it, it's called Festbier, and the reason I got it is because, well, a few weeks back, the end of September, early October is very famous for Oktoberfest. Obviously, there wasn't a big Oktoberfest this year, and a lot of virtual beer clubs and subscriptions were sending out a lot of German beers, and this is one of the ones I got. I got this one along with the 700-year-old Dunkel that is probably more popular than this one. The reason this one's really fascinating, and I had some of my fellow beer enthusiasts talking about it, is because it's called Festbier. So they thought, this is the Oktoberfest beer. And it isn't. It's actually a Christmas beer. It was brewed to celebrate the holidays. It's just here a little bit early, which is fine. I don't mind. I mean, you drink the beer for whatever you want to drink it for. Who cares if they made it for Christmas and we drink it for Oktoberfest? Halloween, who cares? It's festive. Let's just do it, right? And there we have 700 years. Now the reality is this is wrong now. This brewery started in 1308. So it's actually 712 years now. But hey, who's splitting hairs, right? 700 years. Maybe, well, they're probably thinking, we'll make a new label when we get to 750. Who's beating us on this number? Nobody, right? Amazing. All right, let's pop this open. Now I don't have an ingredients list, except for, as you can imagine, water, barley, malt, hops, and yeast. Put that down, give it a little smell. Smells nice. It's very malt forward. I already know that. What it says on the website, I can just read it to you. Special festival beer is brewed specially for Christmas season. A brewer's thank you to the faithful ABK beer drinker. This traditional special beer has a substantial amber-colored, malt-stressed, bottom-fermented lager, full-bodied and full-flavored. Of course, brewed to the Bavarian Purity Law. That sounds, well, that was a loud noise, pretty amazing. I can't believe this, but my typical glass I would use, a German glass to put this in, went to the charity shop. I didn't realize that. When we refurbed the house, wife and we went and gathered up stuff that we thought we weren't going to use. And somehow, I used to have a Hofbräuhaus boot. I used to all sorts of glassware. And I guess now I'm going to have to resort to the closest thing I can find, which was my Toronto Maple Leafs glass. So, go Leafs. Let's pour a bit of that in there. So I'm going to make an assumption that there might be some crap in the bottom. That's pretty typical of German beers, but I didn't check enough. Look at the color. I'm distracted already. That is fantastic. I wish I could turn the camera around and show you this backlit against the light that's coming into the window behind me. Now this isn't going to focus very well, but look at that color. That's really nice, isn't it? Let's check it out. Whoa, it's got a real kind of breakfast cereal kind of thing going on. Now, if you're familiar with Weiss beers, or this is not, which this is not, some of the older styled beers, I'm familiar with getting, like, I used to call it the homebrew taste when I used to brew my own beer badly in the early days. But wow, it's a powerhouse of malt. It makes me like, I'd love to know the hops that go in here. Of course, they're going to be German hops, and those tend to have a very low alpha acid. So you're getting a very sustained, light floral, but nothing very forward. Let's give it a little sip. Wow, it's got a real molassesy thing going on. You do take, I'm wrong in that you do pick up the hops. The hops are there, but they're complementing the caramel kind of super power malt. What is the percentage? I got to point that out because it's not a 5, it's a 6. Also evident. It's incredibly sweet, incredibly malty. The hops aren't there to conceal any of the alcohol level. And it is, for being a 6%, usually when I get to a 10 or something high up like that, like an imperial anything, I consider it a bit of a sipper. This is a bit of a sipper. The sweetness and the real graininess of it means that it's like a gift that keeps on giving. You get a full, powerful mouthfeel, but a really sustained, almost like a resiny bitter around the side of the tongue that I'm still getting. And as that fades, it leaves an acidity, which is almost a bit, not metallic, that's a bit harsh, but it's, I don't know, I want to say rustic or rusty. There's a bit of an acidity there that's a late hit that is good. And then actually I would say that it's kind of annoying, and then I'm going to go back to it. Because things like that, when you have a beer, if you just have it once, you have a tendency to go, then you have it again, and your palate's used to it, and actually it can make the beer pretty good. I think that's kind of happening. It's a little on the strange side. So I did have a Dunkel that I just had on my own. I had a bunch of them, and I know that beer, so I drank it, and I like it, for sure. I was curious about this one, which is why I wanted to review it, because this actually is the first time I've had this one. I like everything about it, except I'm really uncertain about that lingering taste, which is like a acidic sweet. I don't want to say vinegary. That's not correct. Not that kind of acidity. Almost like there's a bit of lemon in there. It also, this is going to be very specific. If you ever overhop a beer, or if you put bagged hops in a beer, I did this once. I put bagged hops in a beer as a late hop, and I broke the bag by accident. And I could get the pellet, like the chewiness of the pellet was not the desired result in the slightest. It had almost like when you smell, if you ever have a dog and you smell the biscuits of the dog food, right? That's not a great smell. That's almost like the flavor I'm getting in the aftertaste with the acidity. It's not great, but it's really great up front. Very strange. Okay. So, 700-year-old beer. If it's still being brewed to the Bavarian Purity Law, like hats off. Hats off to Germany generally for being such a, let's say, monumental influence in the quality of what represents good beer right now. Going all the way back, as I said, 15, 16, and before. And yeah, okay, all right. Let's throw a little bit of credit at the Romans. Why not, right? I feel inspired to go watch Life of Brian now. So, what do I rate this? One last hit. I would say it's not as good as the Dunkel. And I know exactly what I would do to make it better, but it would breach the Bavarian Purity Law. Ah, crap. So, I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10 in terms of flavor. Maybe a 6.5. It's got nostalgia. It's like I'm drinking a glass of nostalgia for beers that existed prior to even, say, 1960s and back. Like people were just brewing what were core range. They weren't innovating too much. And now innovation's gone nuts. This is like a little glass of history and a glass of nostalgia. But would I buy it and drink it regularly? I would have to say no, actually. I wouldn't. It's been an interesting experiment. It's like I'm drinking something quite ancient, and although I respect it, I wouldn't keep drinking it. All right, so I'm gonna lower that to like a 6.5, which is fine. I can't rate it for uniqueness because it's not unique at all. It is 100% accurate, so that's just gonna land me in the middle. The packaging, actually, for a really old brewery, they are totally modern. And I love the logo. I love this is a small bottle. I'm used to buying it. Well, actually, I'm used to buying this in Germany on a really big bottle. And I kind of like the fact that there's a modern craft size bottle of it I could just pick up. As well as when I'm in Germany, I can get the normal size of that. So that's really, that's a really evidence that they're not just sticking in the past. They're offering the new beers. They're offering old beers in a new format. which I have to give them credit for. So I'm going to give me a little bonus point on those ones. And let's call that like an 8 out of 10 on packaging. So we got an 8 plus a 6.5, and I'm only going to do this out of 20, so that gives me about a 3.5. Yeah, that's probably exactly-ish right. So I'll throw this a 3.5 out of 5 on Untappd. I feel pretty good about that. And it's good. Now, I'm going to throw a whole bunch of links down in the notes. Go check those out. So I'll have links directly to the brewery, and you can buy this all over the place. So I would usually have a where to buy link down there. And I will have links to the history of the brewery, so you can just have a little read. Look at some of the pictures that are really cool, but I've put some up already on the show. But yeah, all right, what makes beer great? And a review of ABK's Festbier, a 712-year-old brewery from Bavaria. Unbelievable, right? Thanks for watching. My name's Steve Jaguar. If you like beer, why not subscribe? Why not ring the bell? Why not give me a thumbs up so other people get to see this and learn more about breweries, about beer, about what makes it great? Thanks for watching.